Welcome back. At a time when the world's eyes were fixated on the potential truce talks between US and Iran, the world woke up to yet another security scare for the US President Donald Trump after shots were fired in the premise of Washington Hilton, the same place where Donald Trump was present as part of the White House Correspondents Dinner. The shooting took place near the security screening area and multiple gunshots were fired, at least 5 to 8 rounds. Inside the ballroom where the president was present, there were scenes of panic. Guests dropped for cover under the tables. After hearing those gunshots, Secret Service agents stormed in and Donald Trump and First Lady were whisked out of the ballroom swiftly amid heavy security. But viewers, could this situation have been avoided? It's not a secret to anyone that gun culture has put lives at risk multiple times in the United States. And if anything, these incidents only once again put the focus on the issue. For Donald Trump, this is yet another attempt on his life in the last 3 years alone, and that's certainly a cause for concern for the US and, according to many, a global embarrassment as well. Donald Trump has denied any links of this incident with Iran, and the shooter's links to the Democrats indicate that this attack could also be linked to political rivalry. But is it now time for the US to put an end to gun culture, is a question many are asking.
The man has been captured. They're going to his apartment. I guess he lives in California. And he's a sick person, a very sick person. And we don't want things like this to happen. I think it's very important that I say, though, and I told the representatives of the evening, they did such a beautiful job, it was such a beautiful evening. And again, they're talking about free speech in our Constitution. That's what it's all about, not just White House Correspondents. It was really based on free speech in our Constitution. I want to thank the First Lady that was a rather traumatic experience for her. There's a lot of action taking place up there very quickly. Well, all you can do, look, I don't care how many people you have, how good they are. They can be the greatest people. You have the greatest security in history. If you have a whack job who's got a brain, but it's a little bit distorted or a lot distorted, they can make trouble. I would say, Pete, right? You know, they can make trouble. Some of these people are of genius level IQ, and they're nuts. So it can be trouble. So you do absolutely the best. You get the best. We have the best people. Well, look, it was proven tonight. He started running from 50 yards, and he was fast. He was like a blur on tape. He was moving. They turned. It was very impressive the way they got him, because a lot of people would be looking and saying, you know, it's like a weird feeling, and they would let him get through, but they didn't let him get through. They drew those guns so fast. They looked like Matt Dillon. They looked like somebody that knew what they were doing, and we really do. But it comes with the territory, and if you want to do a great job, I really believe that. And you take a look at what's happened to some of our greatest presidents, and it doesn't happen to people that don't do anything. And it's not going to deter me from winning the war in Iran. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. I really don't think so, based on what we know. But we're going to continue to do a great job. That's all I can do.
Let me go across to our guests. Tonight we're joined by Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow ORF. We have Sierra Claire, Foreign Policy Analyst, and Mark Mirowitz, Political Analyst and Professor, State University of New York Maritime College. Thank you very much for joining us on the broadcast. Sierra Claire, I want to come to you first. Donald Trump says we have the greatest security in history, and yet the man managed to fire shots in the security screening area. It's a massive breach.
It is. President Trump is trying to, be a leader, and I think the American people appreciate that about him. So, I don't want to say, oh, he shouldn't have said that, but there is somebody who needs to come out and say that this was a security breach and it's being fixed. And we haven't heard that said yet. I think that there's people who need to look deeper into all of these instances. There are 3 now, and ask national security questions and do actual thorough investigations and stop sweeping things under the rug. And so I hope that those people are doing that as we speak, and maybe it's classified, but they also need to say it publicly.
But who do you think is trying to brush this aside?
Well, I'm just referring to the past, assassination attempts and actual assassinations where we had the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We don't know anything about that person. They did some cursory investigations and they decided that, they found a diary of his or something. And so that was the end of it. They need to look into his Reddit activity. They need to look into all of his online activity. And the same thing for the Butler, Pennsylvania shooter. We don't know anything about that person. So I do think that, they have kind of wanted to sweep these things under the rug and say, oh, well, there was just a crazy person and we found their manifesto and now it's over. And, maybe at the time that could work, but now this has become a pattern and we need to investigate further why it's a pattern, how these people are getting radicalized, and why they are being, basically told to target the president of the United States.
Okay, Professor Mirowitz, your first reaction. These people are radicalized. They are being told how to attack the president.
I think this is totally, I disagree completely with all due respect. This has nothing to do with sweeping under rugs or radicalization. Nobody knows what the causes of the other two attempts were or this one. What is the important takeaway of this evening was the president's poise in how he dealt with this and how he had a press conference right afterwards and how this was not political, non-political. The journalistic corps, the press corps of the United States was in the room with the president, and they saw finally up close what this president is challenged with. Every president in our country has been challenged. As the president said, this is risky, and that's just a fact of life. But I think he was impressive. I don't think whether you're Republican, Democrat, or whatever, and I'm a big supporter of the president, and I think he showed leadership. He showed leadership, just like Reagan did when he was injured in an attempt at the same hotel years ago. This is not politics. He called for a press conference within an hour, and he even said he wanted to go back and do the presentation. So I think this needs to be looked at with more realistically, and it's nothing to do with conspiracies or anything. I don't know
what is it. If this is not radicalization, if this is
absolutely not,
then what is it according to you?
Absolutely not. It is. How do we know what this is about? We don't know anything about the first shooter at Butler, the second shooter at the golf course, and this guy has just been apprehended. He's from California. Nobody knows anything about him. And whether we're sweeping or not sweeping, I have to say with all due respect, our Secret Service is top of the line. How he got to be a guest at the hotel and be able to get close up to that is shocking. And I think what this was an incredible, unbelievable event in American history. But at the same time, the takeaway is about this president. This president is a person, a leader of poise. Did you see his poise? Did you see how he spoke right afterwards and commended and thanked the Secret Service for what they did? Because what they do is very risky, very dangerous. One of the Secret Service officers was even shot.
Yes.
So I think we need to go away from all of this, who's the guy, what, that's going to come out if it comes out, obviously. What the motivation is that, this goes on. It doesn't just go on in the United States. It goes on all over the world. It just is an unfortunate appendage to being a leader. And when you're a leader, you have to face certain impacts. And this is what the president said. I respect the president, and I think he handled himself marvelously. And the journalists saw it. Even the journalists who are against him. Many of the journalists in the room are against him. And I think they saw how he behaved. They also saw how dangerous.
But the conversation is not about, the conversation is not about his poise. The conversation is more about the security breach. I want Sushant Sareen to come in.
And three presidential assassination attacks on the same president doesn't happen everywhere in the world.
Yes, that's the point I'm trying to bring to fore. 3 attacks in 3 years, Sushant Sareen, we don't know anything. That's the comment coming in at the moment from the fellow panelists.
Yeah, that's true. But let's also be realistic about this particular attack. I don't think Trump was in any danger whatsoever. The assailant did not come anywhere close to him. It was, I think, one floor below or something like that. So this happened. There was no explosive which blew off. This guy probably fired a gun at somebody. In fact, the Secret Service worked. We keep talking about security breach, but actually the breach was only to the extent that despite the cordon around the president, there was a guy who attempted to breach that cordon. And I think the security system out there actually worked. They stopped this guy before he got anywhere close to Donald Trump. So Trump's life was not in any danger. This was not like the attack which happened in Pennsylvania, where he got saved by a fraction of an inch, right? So that was genuinely serious. That was a real attempt on his life, and he was under grave threat at that time. This is nowhere close to that. So yes, the security system worked, but look, we actually don't know what exactly the motivations of this guy are. Now, it is possible he's just one of those crazy characters looking for his 15 minutes of fame. He could be that. He could be either a left-wing nut or a right-wing nut. You don't know about that. Politics is very polarized. It's very, very vicious in the United States now. More vicious than I've ever seen in my living years. It is what it is, right? So we really don't know. But I think Trump is right to the extent when he says this has really nothing to do with Iran. Maybe in an oblique way. Maybe in an oblique way, if he's a right-wing nut, he's angry why Trump has gotten to this war. If he's a left-wing nut, he's also angry why Trump has gotten into this war. So maybe in that very oblique sense. But for anybody to say that, this guy's been radicalized by the Iranians or he has some Islamist connection, I don't think so. You can't rule it out until the investigation is complete. But I don't think that has happened. Look, Swati, the problem is that the way news is being handled today, and Professor Claire is right when she talks about what is happening on the social media, what is the kind of what is the kind of material that you are consuming, and whether you like it or not, somewhere along the line it starts seeping into your head. It is so visceral that kind of stuff which is appearing on news media, and if you're a news junkie, it's very difficult to convince somebody who might be very highly educated but is actually an idiot that the whole world is not a conspiracy, that everything which is happening is not aimed against you. But if you are looking at all this programming, it's very easy to get convinced that the whole world is aiming at you and you need to do something about it. And some crazy guy gets into his head that he is going to go and do something about it. So I don't know whether he has any links with any of those organized left-wing groups, radical groups, or any right-wing group. We don't know what his affiliations are. Apparently, he's given some money to the Democratic Party. But again, to pull in the Democratic Party and blame them for this, I think that's ridiculous, actually. But, there are people on the left who are also very vicious. So we don't know. Let's wait and see what comes out of the investigation.
Okay, Donald Trump has already declared that he's a sick man, the person who attacked him. Now, Professor Mirovitz, another interesting reaction that came in from Donald Trump, and he spoke about the ballroom which is under construction. He said that this event would never have happened with the militarily top secret ballroom currently under construction at the White House. It cannot be built fast enough.
Well, first of all, the ballroom has super bulletproof glass and it's top of the line. But about the hotel and about this, first of all, I looked this up. I don't think there's ever been a situation where a Secret Service agent, except when they shot themselves or something happened, a mishap, where they've actually been shot in an attack on the president. I don't believe so. I looked it up just a minute ago. This is a very serious thing. I think the president was certainly in danger. The man was carrying rifles, guns, knives, who knows what else. Who he is, what he is, he gave, as you said, as my distinguished colleague said, he gave $25 to the Democratic Party. And honestly, his motivation it's of importance, but it is the most important point is protecting the president going forward, to make sure the president is protected. And that point, I think, is worth to look into, how a guest at a hotel can go in a hotel like the Washington Hilton when the president's coming, and that the president, he was charging. Who knows? Luckily, thank God, the Secret Service was there and intervened. But the people who were there, you showed this in the early part of this program. You showed Olivia Reingold, and the people. These are all the top journalists. And they were in fear of their lives. And you heard from Wagia, who was the head of the White House Correspondents Association. They were fearful. I mean, this was a real threat. And now, in retrospect, we see that with the great work of the Secret Service, they were able to stop him. But, I mean, look, there's never been, this is a cutting edge event. The Butler event was terrible. The golf course was terrible. This is terrible. If you want to put it all together, to me, as the president said, he said, it's a risky thing to be president. He took the statistics of presidents and how many presidents there have been and how many presidents have been assassinated. And that is a sad, sad thing about our history, that we have a number, he says 5.8%. So the point I'm trying to get at is the takeaway here is not political. It's not about radicalization. It's not by sweeping under the rug. It's about a horrible event. And I think that we need to be able to look forward to make sure he is protected when he goes outside. He needs to be circumspect about it, certainly. Because there are people out there who are violent, like this guy, who's a teacher and a computer guy, an engineer. Who knows?
Okay.
I don't
Who
think
knows?
we'll
But you're sure, you're saying for sure, you're certain that this is not about radicalization. This is non-political. Sierra Claire?
Of course not.
Okay. Sierra Claire, there are, however, unanswered questions. The most important being, how did this guy get access to the area?
Right. And, they have interviewed his family, and there's preliminary reporting coming out saying that this guy was a very radical leftist. His family said he often made radical statements. He was part of some anti-Trump, anti-Republican groups or something like that online. So, I believe that he was radicalized. And we have a real problem with that. And, and then how did he get access and get close enough into where he was in the lobby and in the same building as this event that was going on? And everybody says, well, he didn't get in the room. That's great. He didn't get in the room. Good job for the people who were there on the ground who didn't let him get in the room. Him being in the hotel was still a huge risk. If this had been some kind of a bomber or something, there could have been real consequences. Somebody pointed out that there was a line when people were arriving to the dinner and they were all kind of stuck in a line. That could have been a mass shooting event, without him entering the ballroom. So there were still a lot of risks for the fact that he got into this building, and that's what we need to look at with the security.
So Shansarin, even if the president was not the target, this could have turned into a very tragic shooting incident where others could have been harmed. There are a lot of people, commentators who want to shine a light on the gun culture, prevalent gun culture in US.
Look, for somebody like us in India, it seems to be a problem, and but not that the Americans are going to fix it. I think they're so addicted to guns, like they are to fentanyl, that they're not going to do anything about the gun culture in America. It's part of their constitution, part of how the country has come up. But the fact that every second day you hear of a massacre in a school, in a university, in a club, on the streets. I would have thought that, any sensible country would have done something to restrict guns, be very strict about who can and who cannot possess a gun. But clearly, they don't give a damn about it. The lobbies are too strong. They're not going to do anything about it. And the problem is that if you have madcaps like this character who we are talking about, he has access to guns. And apparently, this guy was carrying licensed weapons. Again, the problem with him was that there is some reports, I don't know the veracity of those, that he had already checked into this hotel a day or two in advance. Now, there was nothing about him, at least from public records, that he was not a person of interest. He was not somebody who was involved in any kind of a radical group which would set alarm bells ringing. I'm sure if he was indeed a hotel guest, people would have vetted that, list. The Secret Service or whoever is in charge would have vetted that list. All of those things would have happened. And his name would not have thrown up any alarm bells.
Yes.
No alarm bells would have been ringing. So obviously, if you want to do a lot of hair splitting about it, yes, there was a security breach. But yes, if this guy had managed to get through one or two layers of security where the lines were, and he had managed to shoot off a weapon, or if he was carrying an explosive which had gone off, and even if one person had died, it would have become a really big incident, right? And these were not insignificant people who were there. There were people from the cabinet, senior officials of the government, top journalists, and an incident in which maybe, say, one or two or half a dozen or a dozen people had been injured or killed, I think all hell would have broken loose. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But the thing is that if you allow guns and madmen to possess guns, then it's like a monkey with a gun.
Absolutely.
A monkey with the gun.
At the moment, no criminal antecedents. We don't know what made him do this. We don't know the reasons. Of course, the security agencies and the officials who are involved will investigate in this direction and look at all the angles. Sushant Sareen, Professor Mirovitz, and Sierra Claire, that's all the time I have for debate number 2. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for participating.